quite interesting when you have such a career at a big pharmaceutical. You probably would have been in the next 3 years, maybe a potential candidate for a C-level at Novo Nordisk. So, I mean, what made you change to a small startup or relatively small startup in Denmark? So that's mainly the first question. So what made you change?
Sure. So I had the privilege, I think you just alluded to it, of leading, I guess, what is the biggest opportunity that Novo Nordisk has had for the last decades, which is the launch of the molecule semaglutide. And I could see that after having done that and being able to set it on a trajectory to now a turnover of $10 billion US, then you ask yourself the question, when will I get the next opportunity to do something like this? And in all honesty, I can say that it probably is going to take 15 years before the next opportunity of that magnitude comes at Novo Nordisk. And I am impatient by nature, and then I am a builder by nature. And I think I don't have the I guess, patience to wait 15 years for the next big thing to come around. And I have a building gene. And I think that maybe semaglutide is now better left off as people who are liking to do incremental growth opportunities. And therefore, the timing for me was superb in terms of looking at the next big challenge and the next big opportunity, and looking across the different new technology platforms in the pharma and biotech space. There's really two. There's cell therapy and there's gene therapy. And the mission that STEM Medical is on to bring stem cell-based treatments that really work to patients is something that spoke more than anything to me. So I wouldn't want it any other way than being at STEM Medical and working on the next technology frontier and building for the next big breakthrough, which in my book is that of cell therapy. The story is the following. I had already at Novo been given the opportunity to build the cell therapy franchise at Novo, and we had really identified sort of 3 big hurdles that we needed to overcome to make cell therapy a success. And the first one of those was showing not just great data when it comes to animal models, but also clinically great data. Secondly, to be able to not only produce a few stem cells, but produce at scale. And this is really like a journey that we could see was going to take us 10, 15 years. To be able to produce at scale and do so in a relatively cost-effective manner. And then thirdly, of course, to in a regulatory landscape, which is rather new and unsophisticated yet when it comes to stem cell-based therapies, find regulatory clearance. So when I was called up, and I knew this was going to take 10, 15 years at Novo, and they're going to succeed at Novo, but it's going to take some time. And then I was called up, and I was presented STEM Medical, and they presented the data for their first application, which has been published in The Lancet, which is really to take a graft of fat and then enrich it with stem cells. And when you enrich a graft of fat with stem cells and reimplant it, you get a survival rate of the fat by some 80% instead of some 45%, which really, to me, was clinically very meaningful, that you can actually get what you are expecting when you take out some fat and implant it to another place in the body. And we'll get back to why that is useful. The second one, in terms of producing cells at scale, STEM Medical at that point in time were working in what we call 2D, but on their way to 3D, which we have now succeeded in the meantime, which means that instead of producing 22 very thin cell stack factories, now is a production in a bioreactor. And this makes all the difference because you can suddenly scale it. At Novo, we were still not able to produce for more than one patient at a time, meaning that recruiting for clinical trials was going to take a long time. Here we're able to produce some 12, 14 billion cells in one cell batch in a 2-week turnaround time. So really quite extraordinary what the team had already set in stage and now has succeeded with. And then the last thing is, of course, if you are impatient, then getting to patients is important. And we already have regulatory clearance for the first application in plastic surgery in Northern Europe and are already pilot commercializing in Denmark. So I don't know any other I guess, stem cell-based treatment that is already on the market with European regulatory clearance and with clinically really quite impressive results published in the Lancet that are then also able to generate a pilot commercialization. So that's really what won me over, because when you're working with a next technology frontier, then being able to show not only that it works in theory, or that you can show it in animal models, or you can show it even in early clinical human setting, but taking it all the way and showing that here we have a solution with a new technology platform that you can actually practically work and use in patients makes at least me very excited.
What we experience here in Switzerland, if people come from big pharma or they try to integrate startups, there's always a big conflict or a high rate of failure. So now you come from big pharma. I think there are 2 other people who joined you on that ride. So how would you say, how was your arrival and let's say the merge of these 2 worlds? How did you experience that?
Yeah, I think that I had a little bit of a head start because since I was anyway at Novo looking for how I could get to work with the next technology frontier, I was given the great, I mean, I guess, opportunity and privilege, if you will, to build an actual stem cell-based therapy unit at Novo. When you do that, you suddenly get in contact with the biotech world. And when you get in contact with the biotech world, either my impression is that either you learn to love it, or you can feel an immediate sense of energy from people who are having shorter timelines, having quicker decision making, but also more willing to take risk, as opposed to your classical pharmaceutical setup, which is to really scale and make a lot of people run in more or less the same direction in order to mobilize big amounts of people. And I have to say that for me, it was a huge energy boost to actually work with people who have the same impatience as me, as well as the same urge for getting things done as me, as well as the same urge of making a bit riskier bets than I had been used to in the pharmaceutical industry. So if you ask me, I'm having a blast. If you ask the team, I'm hoping that they will tell you the same thing.
Okay, good.
I think the main hurdles really are that those 3 that I mentioned to you. Yes. One is that you can show great data in animal models, and it has been shown for a long period of time. That's of course great, but oftentimes when you go from animal models to humans, what typically happens is that the cell dose is a fraction or order of magnitude lower in humans as opposed to the doses tested in animal models. So 1/10 typically is the dose that you go in with. Going in with 1/10 of the dose per kilogram and expecting the same results as you see in animal models might be on the optimistic side. I have at Novo experienced, it's funny because it's not only in cell therapy, it's unique in cell therapy, and I'll tell you why in 1 second, but it's not only in cell therapy. When you look at semaglutide at Novo Nordisk or Ozempic, then originally also it went in with a 0.5 milligram dose. Now for the last, I guess, new launches of Wegovy, it's a 2.4 milligrams. So already you are 2.5 times up the dose versus the Ozempic, which is 1 milligram, but it's been increasing ever so much all the time. Whereas you could actually have gotten the same results going to 2.4 straight off. It's really a question of where is your risk level, if you will, and what are you willing to test. Now, that's a problem already, if you will, in the pharmaceutical industry, that you're testing lower levels because you're erring on the safe side as opposed to the efficacious side when you're testing early on, out of risk averseness. So from that perspective, of course, it has its merits. When it comes to cell therapy, however, it gets like double bad, because on the one hand, you have the pharmaceutical conservatism in terms of doses that is notoriously present. Then on the other hand, you typically then have a biotech who is pushing for higher doses because they really want to test and show results and see what the platform can do. But when it comes to cell therapy, the reason why people are not testing higher doses in a biotech setting is typically because it is expensive for them to produce higher doses. So you have like the worst of both worlds. You have a pharmaceutical conservatism, and then you have a biotech cost constraint, if you will. So one of the biggest challenges, and I think maybe the biggest challenge in making stem cell-based therapies come to market effectively, is that of applying the right dose. Just 2 days ago, Bayer came out with results from its Parkinson's trial, where they have tested embryonic pluripotent stem cells differentiated into dopaminergic neurons for the treatment of Parkinson, drilling a hole in people's head and putting them in. You'd think that drilling a hole in people's head and putting stem cells in, then you've already taken on a bit more risk than what you're used to as a big pharmaceutical.
Yes.
But still, they're going in with doses where they haven't maxed out on the dose response. So if they take the lower dose, they help people for better symptom relief in around an hour and a half a day. For the higher dose, it's around 4 hours a day. And they haven't even tested out what would happen if you double that dose or quadruple that dose. So if there's any like one thing that is hindering stem cell-based treatments from effectively getting to the market and showing good clinical results, is that of appropriate dosing.
Okay, cool. Thank you. You just mentioned some protocols where you can use it. So what are the current trends, or where do you look into, or what could be potential protocols for rollout?
Sure. So when it comes to stem cells, so for the last I guess even decades, people have tested using mesenchymal stem cells in different applications. So it's notoriously underdosed, so they have had good indications of results. If you're looking at the indications that typically have been used in, it's been in osteoarthritis, in particular osteoarthritis of the knee with mesenchymal cells. It's also been in inflammatory diseases, such as Crohn's disease. You'd also have in heart failure. So if you have an inflammatory origin in the heart, there you have also tried to use it, and then even in type 1 diabetes, as well as in Parkinson's disease, you have used stem cells in the form of mesenchymal stem cells. So that's the one area. And again, constant underdosing in this area hasn't shown really the real benefits, and also maybe not using the biologically relevant stem cells for the indications you're treating. Our stem cells are derived, as most, from an adipose tissue graft. So a fat graft you take, you isolate stem cells from that, and then you culture them, and then by that you can proliferate them tremendously if you have the right culturing method, which is what basically one of the secret sources of our platform is, that we can really proliferate cells. With that, you can really treat all the indications I was alluding to. There is, over the last couple of years, also an increased usage of what you called embryonic stem cells, or pluripotent stem cells, either from embryonic origin or from induced origin. And those are functional cells. So you take, it's as opposed to our mesenchymal stem cell, which is anti-inflammatory in nature, then you take a functional cell, which means, for example, making a beta cell for the treatment of type 1 diabetes that helps you secrete insulin. Or you take a dopaminergic neuron, which is replacing the loss of dopaminergic neurons that you have in the brain when you develop Parkinson's. So these two are really the main sorts of stem cells treatments being used, that are mesenchymal cells, which are anti-inflammatory and then can differentiate into fat and to chondrocytes, i.e. cartilage, or the pluripotent cells, which are more functionally specific cells that you differentiate and use in a treatment of a particular disease. In all fairness, since the body is basically built up of cells, you can, in theory, and maybe even in practice, use functional cells for the treatment of diseases that stem from cell degeneration in most organs. So this is really a widely applicable platform across the human body, if you will. And it's really quite I guess, intuitive to understand that if you are a type 1 diabetic and you're lacking beta cells, then if you can produce a functional beta cell structure and implant it into instead of the lack of beta cells that you have from the existing pancreas, you should be able to treat the disease. Similarly, you'd find it in many other diseases. So really a very broad platform that you can use across indications.
I mean, quite impressive, but I mean, okay, so when there's so much usage or so much what can be solved, there's a bit of competition as well, right?
Sure.
How do you approach competition at the moment, or what do you see as your biggest competition at the moment?
Yeah, that's a really good point. The biggest competition we have is on the one hand, and this is a little bit an unfortunate competitor, is I guess mesenchymal, not mesenchymal, but stem cell based, non-serious companies. So stem cells have both like a very appealing ring to it, because you're looking at the origin mother cell of the body, and people intuitively can understand that this is something that can be quite potent in treating disease and even proposing opportunities for improved longevity. People, they take advantage of this, and especially non-serious stem cell clinics. So it's really important for us to differentiate ourselves from that, because the clinical evidence generated in I guess falsely set up stem cell based clinics is really one of the competitors where we have to get the reputation of producing clinically relevant and serious science, right? That's the one. And then on the other hand, the competitors are really some of the biotechs and big pharma companies. It'd be Novo Nordisk, obviously being one, Bayer being another, and Novartis increasingly investing in the pluripotent stem cell area. So there we are between, on the one hand, people who are trying to take advantage of stem cells and doing poor science, and on the other hand, the big pharmaceutical giants really investing early on in stem cells. But again, they have a 10-15 year trajectory before they really get something that is potent and reproducible and had generated enough clinical evidence to get on the market. So we're in a sweet spot, if you will, where we are leading the pack, if you will, with serious science, Lancet publications, and a serious clinical and clinically relevant platform, as well as being able to scale that. So long story, but I think we're kind of in a unique position. And to be honest, when I did the due diligence of STEM Medical a year ago, before I joined the company, I was surprised to see that there is this company that has actually cracked the code of many of the big challenges that big pharma is using, and is not a quack company that is pretending that they can produce stem cells for the treatment of any disease out there. So really a quite unique platform, a quite unique company, and with a unique, I guess, both IP platform, manufacturing platform, and so on. So not a lot of competition that looks exactly like us.
Okay, but probably a couple of big ones who could take you over in the future.
I think that would be fair to say. I think most of the things that we do, when you really get to large scale, we have the humility to say that there will be bigger companies that have much more muscle to take this the last step, especially when it comes to the phase 3 clinical trial setup or a global commercialization. Our job really is to show that stem cell based treatments, they really can work, that you can get them to patients, that you can show clinical evidence, and you can make it work commercially as well, because that's the essence of how you move stem cells from being either something that is quack or something that is a 15-year out in the future setup.
Okay, I mean, I just thought about it, but when you said you went from 2D to 3D, that means, I mean, you developed a medical device as well, right? Or the production. So you're...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I guess you could say so. At least a process, as well as a manufacturing device. I would say more than a medical device, because we don't use it directly applied to the patient, if you will. We do the culturing in these bioreactors. Again, this is what it takes when you're leading the pack, if you will. Many companies, including the big pharma that I just talked to you about, when they produce stem cells, they do it in these cell stacks. Their next step is to move it to a bioreactor setup. Now, they are as frustrated as we are on building, or not building, but rather culturing cells in off-the-shelf R&D based bioreactors and R&D based controllers. Controllers, that's basically, I guess, the computer that gives you the signals and metrics as to what medium, what oxygenation levels and so on you should use in order to get the maximum yield out of culturing the cells. Now, being able to not just do this on a research level where you manually switch different bits and pieces, but doing it on an industrial level, no one has done that before in any great degree. This is where we took at first an off-the-shelf solution and now have industrialized it. So to your point, yes, it takes also a little bit more when you're leading the pack in terms of industrializing things, something that we'll also benefit from as a company. And we already have the first many companies asking us how they can, when they have progressed their clinical trials, get to learn from how you actually scale up and industrialize the production of stem cells. So a lot of demand would be coming there, and I think there's really like three, I guess, overall opportunities with STEM Medical. One of them being the commercialization of the first indication, if you will, which is in plastic surgery, where, as I spoke to you before, when you have the opportunity to take fat out from a person and enrich it with stem cells, re-inject it, and then have a full survivability of fat. It's like when you, I think a surgeon told me that this is like an anti-inflammatory Play-Doh, was the best description he had. So when you have an anti-inflammatory Play-Doh as a surgeon, that means that anywhere where you're missing volume in the body, either in a plastic surgery setting, in a cosmetic surgery setting, or an internal surgery setting for incontinence, for example, where the muscle is not strong enough to keep the water, prevent the water from flowing through. If you can fill it up with something that is an anti-inflammatory Play-Doh, that would be really attractive. Our first application is in plastic surgery, because we can then work with healthy individuals, which means that the regulatory requirements are clean and clear, and we just need to generate the safety data to be able to consistently show that this is both safe and efficacious as a volume filler, if you will. That's the one opportunity with the company, really making it big. And what we're talking about here is that instead of having implants, then you'd be using natural fat enriched with stem cells and have a natural solution either for reconstruction of a breast, or this is the second opportunity that where many patients come in and ask for the STEM medical treatment, is when you have had an implant and you either want to replace it because of complications such as capsular contracture, or because the implant expires after 10 or 20 years, depending on the implant. This is really an opportunity to generate a natural reconstruction of the breast. This is one opportunity for STEM Medical, and of course the market for that is tremendous, with some 4 million surgeries being done annually. If you fast forward a couple of years, and I think there's 1.3% of all women globally that have a breast augmentation by an implant. So of course many of them would like to replace that. Here the application of our platform is I guess second to none. Now, that's one thing, and of course you could imagine that the potential partners for that in the future is something along the lines of AbbVie and J&J, as well as establishment labs. Then the second application is really when we go into therapeutics of the platform, and here our first indication is focused on osteoarthritis of the knee, and the reason being that both fat in and of itself has shown good functional improvement, as well as pain reduction for people with osteoarthritis of the knee, and even more so mesenchymal stem cells. Our platform, since we're really good at growing many cells, allows us to increase the concentration tremendously as compared to what has been tested before. So my point about there being a consistent underdosing in the treatment with stem cells is where we can really make a difference. With osteoarthritis of the knee, we're looking at a dose which is 10-15 times higher than what other competitors are working on. The third one, as I told you about before, Max, is when you're able to actually have a platform when you are producing stem cells at scale, then this becomes extremely attractive. and that's where you sort of have the last value driver of the company. So these really are the three reasons, if you will, that I also joined the company, is that you have something that's applicable, that is de-risked, you have something that has therapeutic promise, and you have a platform which is scalable, makes it extremely attractive.
Okay, I mean, yeah, that sounds logic and also quite perfect. I mean, what would you say are the biggest hurdles you have as STEM Medical? I mean, it's usually sounds too good to be true. So there's probably also some things where you are challenging.
Sure. I think the biggest hurdles we're facing, I guess, is actually how you define the company. So in terms of the customer group, so we're going after that. That's relatively clear. In terms of the therapeutic development, that you can also argue for. In terms of the platform, you can also argue for that. But what kind of company is it really? And I'll give you since you also work with investors, I'll give you a fun story that Joseph, who's my head of business development, and we have been signing up for different conferences, investor conferences with life science. And hey, Joseph. And we have consistently found that it's difficult to actually find a category that fits STEM Medical. So we're under life science. We are, of course, you could talk about us as a biotech, but when you start going down to what the applications are, typically there is a missing category of those that work with surgical applications in biotech that just doesn't fit. And especially if you work with something that has a cosmetic surgery application as well as a therapeutic application. This is where there is no clear definition of or clear category for us. So clearly, this is, I think, one of the biggest sort of hurdles we have is that what do you call a company with a strong new biotech platform in stem cell therapy with different applications across both something that is therapeutic and cosmetic? Where do you fit that company? That I think is sort of probably our biggest hurdle, if you will. But I can see Joseph, he also just popped in. Joseph, do you have additional hurdles that you want to share with Max?
Well, yes. So I think you're absolutely right that the biggest hurdle is actually to find basically a space within investors that can sort of bridge both a reconstructive surgery asset as well as a traditional therapeutic asset. You can actually find categories within, I would say, surgical equipment, but the category that would be sort of reconstructive or plastic surgery typically doesn't exist, which makes it hard when you attend those conferences. So, and then of course, it's always difficult to be the ones that are building a market, right? We are alone in our category. The closest technologies are really quite unsophisticated compared to what we can do. So just educating the market, educating hospitals, clinics, surgeons, etc., about an area always takes time, and it's actually quite a big effort. And Klaus can certainly speak to building markets when you're first movers. So I would say those two combined.
Okay. I mean,
if I could just put I mean, if I were to sort of build on an analogy of that, I mean, I feel very much like if you take Novo Nordisk some 7-8 years back, having the discussions about entering obesity treatment, extremely similar situation with two sort of key similarities. One is that it was obesity at that point in time, and still may not be everywhere, defined as a disease. So you're looking at something which is not a treatment of a recognized disease, right? And at that point in time, the company internally had already spent 20 years going about discussing whether it would be the right thing to do for Novo Nordisk as a company to go in and provide treatment for obesity. Now, if you fast forward 7-8 years from that, the very same people who were most skeptical are, of course, as we all do, most proud about the accomplishments of Novo Nordisk, having the guts to go in a disease that was not recognized a disease, but with a huge patient demand and requirement, and actually not only building a market, but seeing what the patient pool can do to you. extremely similar when it comes to our platform, and also extremely similar when you think about the fact that the obesity space, there had been a graveyard of innovations for decades, and nothing had happened for 30 years. And then suddenly you have something that actually works. When you're thinking about across the two applications that we have, it's the same thing. When it comes to plastic surgery, the implant was invented 40 years ago. Nothing has happened in 40 years in that space. So the need for disruption, especially with the requirement of patients of having something that doesn't look like, that isn't a complete artificial part to be put into your body, is huge. Now, there's a lot of I guess, also conservatism around, or habit of course, we just use implants because that's what we've always been using. So, but it has exactly the same flair as with obesity. And also, by the way, many of the same prejudices as compared to whether it is the right of people to choose what they want to do with their body and how they want to help their body. Very similar. The second one being that of osteoarthritis of the knee, which is also has been like a 30-year graveyard of difficulties in solving treatments. Novartis is really investing big in this, as well as the other companies. Everybody wants to crack an arthritis question, but they've had really a hard time finding good solutions to it. The mesenchymal stem cell treatment in osteoarthritis of the knee has exactly the same properties of being what semaglutide has been to the treatment of obesity. So that, I guess, is another reason for having joined STEM Medical as such, is that you recognize some of the business challenges and opportunities, and you can see that they can be cracked, and they can really generate a lot of value across the whole value chain, if you will, both from patients, providers, as well as companies as such.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, for also telling a bit about the rollout from Mozambique. I mean, also we talked about that before, and I also was a bit impressed. I mean, you have a lot of shortage in production now, so probably our people did not invest so much as they should have, maybe. But
could argue, yeah.
I have one for you. I mean, because it's about you. So, what do you want to be remembered for? So that would interest me, Klaus, because you said you wanted to have the next big thing. So yeah. What is the focus on your achievements?
Yeah, no, I think the next big thing would really be to bring stem cell based treatments that actually work to actual patient setting, and not just at a I guess individual clinic setting where an individual I guess doctor who really feels and is fired up and passionate about this new system, but in a broad general medical setting, that you use stem cells for helping people, for example, with osteoarthritis, or for the treatment of a breast reconstruction, or an implant removal. These things would be really something extraordinary to me. Stem cell based therapies that work.
So that means that you will be remembered to remove the plastic of the plastic surgery.
I mean, that would be fantastic. Well put. I mean, I should employ you as our head of marketing. Well done, Max.
Okay, so last question from my side. If you could invite a famous person to dinner, who would it be and why?
So, wow, that's a good question. I was thinking that I'm more keen on the future than on the past. So even my historical idols are people who focus on the future more than the past. So I'd rather, I guess, invite someone like Jennifer Doudna, who does DNA and RNA therapeutics, if you will, or CRISPR inventor, if you really want to be sharp on it. Rather her than Albert Einstein. I'd rather invite Michelle Obama for dinner than Franklin Roosevelt. I'd rather have Greta Thunberg for dinner than Mahatma Gandhi. Maybe even rather Billie Eilish than John Lennon, and maybe rather Elon Musk than Leonardo da Vinci. But or maybe the last one, I think I changed my mind. I think I would probably rather have Leonardo da Vinci and Elon Musk for dinner. So I think that would be the ending note, Max. That having Leonardo da Vinci and Elon Musk for dinner, maybe with Michelle Obama on the side, I think that would be what I would love to do.